What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder. I'm your host, Warren Thompson, and today we have some more Spider-Man news. However, today we are talking about Tom Holland's Spider-Man specifically and Spider-Man 4. Yesterday we talked about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and the Sony Spider-Man universe, but today we will be talking about our main MCU Spider-Man, Tom Holland, and his contract with Disney and Sony. However, we are also going to be talking about the relationship between Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, and Sony, because we also talked about yesterday how Kevin Feige is going to be helping Sony with their Spider-Man projects, but we just learned that Kevin Feige kind of issued a warning to Sony. He warned them about a very specific thing with their Spider-Man universe. In fact, it looks like he kind of discouraged them from going too big too quickly. And now we know that he is working with Sony on the Spider-Man project, so a lot to talk about today, including clearing up some reports that may make people a little bit nervous about the future of Spider-Man. But if you want to stay up to date on Spider-Man and the MCU, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. And speaking of Spider-Man, if you're looking to grab some Spider-Man G Fuel or any of their other collector's boxes like Moon Knight or Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, you can use code COSMIC for 30% off right now at gfuel.com until July 11th. So we'll get into Kevin Feige warning Sony about something, but first let's talk about Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Spider-Man 4. A report came out last night that worried people a little bit. I got a lot of DMs and tweets, but hopefully this video kind of sets your mind at ease. To start off with, it's important to know that Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal, producer over at Sony, after Spider-Man No Way Home came out, they both announced together that they are already working on the next Spider-Man film, Spider-Man 4, for the MCU with Tom Holland, Zendaya, and Jacob Batalon. And they specifically said that the reason they already came out and said this is so that fans would not have to worry about the relationship between Sony and Disney and Marvel Studios and worry about Spider-Man still being in the MCU. Because if you were following Spider-Man a few years ago after Spider-Man Far From Home, we were kind of uncertain on whether or not Spider-Man was going to be remaining in the MCU, and it looked like Marvel Studios and Sony were kind of breaking up, but then they formed a new deal and everything ended up all right. But that is why Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal told us that a new one is being worked on, so we don't have to worry. Having said that, it looks like Tom Holland hasn't actually signed a new deal for Spider-Man 4 yet, and this has fans worried. This report comes from Jeff Snyder via The Ankler, and here's what he had to say. Okay, so Sony may not have the biggest bench in terms of franchises, but it wisely made a deal with Marvel Studios to get its marquee character Spider-Man into the MCU, which helped make the studio's solo Spidey movies must-sees, even more so. And while plans are in motion for another Spidey trilogy starring Tom Holland, I don't believe he has actually signed a deal yet. So, those plans remain unofficial for now. That said, I'm sure that more Spidey adventures with Tom Holland are a top priority for Rothman and co, and he is speaking about the executives at Sony there, and he continues to say, which is also counting on him as the anchor of its budding Uncharted franchise as well. So even though plans are in place, it looks like Tom Holland has not signed a deal for Spider-Man 4, 5, or 6 yet. Now, like I said, this worries some people, but you really don't have to worry. I would be completely and utterly shocked if Tom Holland did not sign a new contract with Sony and Marvel Studios / Disney. And also, there's a very good point made at the end of this quote and report, where Snyder says that Sony is also counting on Tom Holland to be the anchor of its Uncharted franchise, which makes a ton of sense. Sony is putting a lot into that franchise, and Tom Holland is the star of it, and he's also their Spider-Man star. And although Tom Holland hasn't technically signed a deal for another Spider-Man movie or trilogy, I would be shocked if he didn't. So fans don't really have much to worry about here, in my personal opinion. However, yesterday we talked about Kevin Feige getting involved with Sony's Spider-Man universe, which is a very good thing. Now, they pretty much consult Kevin Feige a little bit on all of their projects that are related to Spider-Man, that is, but now it looks like they're going a little bit deeper with consulting Kevin Feige. As I stated yesterday, he is going to be helping them out with their universe, but a new report states that Kevin Feige kind of told them to slow down a bit. In this same report from Snyder at The Ankler, he reports and reveals that Kevin Feige is said to have previously warned Sony not to get too ahead of itself in terms of building some larger universe with the SUMC, which of course stands for Sony Universe of Marvel Characters. And it also says that he still offers notes on all Sony's Marvel films. And this makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense in two different ways. One, it just makes sense that Marvel Studios president would work with Sony on their Marvel films. But two, Kevin Feige kind of started his career working on Spider-Man films. I think some, maybe most, know that Kevin Feige started with Marvel with the X-Men films and the Spider-Man, Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire films. He didn't have any major role during those times, but he was learning and he was helping, which eventually led to him being president of Marvel Studios. So through the Sam Raimi trilogy, Kevin Feige was there with Sam Raimi and with Tobey Maguire. So Kevin Feige has been extremely close to Spider-Man since the live-action adaptations. So who better to have consult with their universe than the man who's been there from the beginning and the president of Marvel Studios? And his advice is 100% right. Sony should not get too ahead of themselves in terms of building this huge Spider-Man universe with a bunch of different projects trying to connect them all together. We've seen another studio kind of be bad at this, Warner Brothers DC Universe, and it kind of seems like that's exactly what they did. They went too big, too fast. I mean, they started off with a Justice League movie. Rather than doing a few individual movies before then and taking a few years to build everything up, they jumped right in, and the universe didn't turn out too hot. And even right now, they're kind of struggling with what to do. Of course, it doesn't really help that Ezra Miller and Amber Heard have been in the spotlight for not so good reasons lately. But the point is they did rush the universe, and that's what Kevin Feige is telling Sony. Don't do that. Don't rush. The MCU started in 2008 with Iron Man. And between Iron Man and the Avengers, there were 4 years in between and 5 movies in between. The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, the First Avenger, and then the Avengers in 2012. They took their time, they didn't introduce too many characters, just the core of the Avengers, and characters like Black Widow and Hawkeye got introduced in other films, not their own films, and they did it right, and that is what Kevin Feige is telling Sony. And if there is anybody who knows how to build a huge cinematic universe and bring it all together, it's Kevin Feige. Now the good news is that Sony hasn't really gone and built anything super huge yet. It seems like they kind of had plans, but maybe Kevin Feige's advice slowed them down just a bit. Yes, Sony has been making Spider-Man movies over the years, but as far as a connected universe is concerned, Venom is kind of the first thing they really did. And of course, we're not talking about the Spider-Man Homecoming trilogy. We don't really count that because that takes place in the MCU. Although Sony is kind of taking a few characters, selected characters, and bringing them into their own universe. But we know that they're going to have a different Spider-Man than Tom Holland, so we'll have to wait and see. Then they tried Morbius, which failed. Now, the pandemic really screwed this up, and it kind of seems like after they filmed it, they kind of changed their mind on the direction they wanted to go, so they did reshoots, so it was kind of set up to fail. It's not really its fault. But now we have Kraven the Hunter coming, we have Madam Web, we have a Spider-Woman project. There's some upcoming things that make you wonder if they are going a little bit too fast, but the good news is that they are consulting with Kevin Feige, and he has warned them about going too fast. And again, he is somebody that you should definitely take advice from, and I know Amy Pascal over at Sony definitely values his opinion. That's how we got Tom Holland Spider-Man in the MCU. Kevin Feige told Sony, Amazing Spider-Man 3 with Andrew Garfield isn't going to work. You're gonna have to let me do it at Marvel Studios and bring Spider-Man into the MCU. Which is what happened, and then Spider-Man became a massive success. So with Kevin Feige helping Sony with their Spider-Man projects, and with both Marvel Studios and Sony really wanting Tom Holland back and already working on a 4th Spider-Man film, I would not worry at all about Tom Holland returning to play Spider-Man in the MCU. And hopefully with Kevin Feige helping Sony out with their Spider-Man universe, that universe will be pretty great as well. But hey, let me know what you think about this news in the comments down below. What do you want to see in Spider-Man 4 and from the Sony universe of Marvel characters? Let me know, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest Marvel news. You can always follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.